inspiring us together. So thank you everybody to be so nice to listen to this journey to Europe. So let's see if technology helps me because um, is always complicated to give it the first trial to share, but hopefully the sharing is working. So can you see my presentation? Okay, good. So, well, our journey today is thanks to this enormous change in our way to give lectures is to Europe. Uh, and especially as because I'm a political and economic geography, we were talking about this the aspect political and economic geography point of view on energy transition. Especially, we will go through on policies and complexity transition in Europe. So basically, my presentation will be conducted in four main parts. So we will give a theoretical overview and the conceptual framework on keywords and items that are helping us. Probably for most of you, it's a kind of review. And the second part is some data. So we will set the framework on primary resources in Europe, import and consumption. All this helps us in the second part. So understanding the key energy transition related policies and actors. And at the end, we will give some, I will not, of course, work on all of them, but we will work on challenges and complexities. So first of all, let's go through what is an energy transition. We have two main, let's say, possible type of definition. One is a typical scientific and technological definition, so a change in the composition and the structure of primary energy supply, the gradual shift from a specific pattern of energy provision to a new state of energy system. The second one, which is the International Renewable Energy or International Organization, set more in a political term, a pathway towards transformation of the global energy sector from fossil fuels based to a zero carbon by the second half of this century. So transition, we see a two different approach. All of them are useful in this presentation, so we keep in mind both of them. The second slide to set the framework, and here I'm citing the work now we have done with Christian Seller and Jaffrey after Jones, is this diamond model that has been, in this case, used also to connect political geography main elements to also the energy transition one. So the main keywords and elements for political is policy, power, and politics. So all these are very useful to understand European policies and situation. Of course, our geography keywords and key items, space, place, and territory. And I would add also following the Sustainable Transition Research Network, landscape and scale. And a bit of an evolutionary economics perspective, distributional skills, technological capabilities, and institutional capacities. In terms of energy itself, I would add energy resources, energy technologies, and consumption patterns. All these you can see just by this diamond how complex and already are the connection, just using this very simple lines connection. Finally, but this is very important not to forget, is that when talking about transition, we do have a time element, and time makes a difference. So we keep this time as a also point of view. So we have to move. Time, of course, is also related to our historical perspective when we talk about energy transition. And by definition, we will see later on what I'm talking about about this perspective. We also have other three technological perspectives that are in theory in our theoretical working papers, books, and we can find the technological one. And often we can relate it to the historical one with Schumpeter's, we will see, the social technological one, and the ecological and climate. I would say that all these four are useful. So the historical and technological are, we can go and rediscover Schumpeter's long waves of innovation. We all know, I think everybody has this in our teaching courses at university, how the evolution of industrialization has been also characterized by changing long wave and change in energies. Another, I love this quotation by Hurry that highlights the role, the social technological linkages. And of course, in our perspective, also on geopolitical aspects as well. How societies are energized is crucial for how they work and how they are powered, playing with a double meaning of power in English. We don't have this in Italian, but in English it's very, very, very enlightening. Last, we will use these quite terms because this sustainability paradigm is really supporting a lot the wave on European policies in the latest decades. So I don't go through all this about sustainability, I just give a couple of reference points. The definition on the Brundtland report, Our Common Future in 1987, that provides the sense of time and as well on top of the sense of present. Sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromise the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So the sustainability paradigm, especially in terms of ecological integrity and the need on to take in consideration environmental issues, has been starting to be really famous as of 1992 after the Earth Rio Summit. But is with the UN 2030 agenda and sustainable development goal that has been really universal and integrated with socio-economic and became an universal roadmap, where two sustainable development goals are related to the topic of today. Number 7, affordable and clean energy, and number 13, climate actions. What we do also love about sustainability paradigm is the capacity to connect 5 Ps: people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. All these also are very relevant, as we know, about in energy transition. This is more practical, but still inside of the international evolution of international agreements related to sustainability is a subset. The first was actually in Rio. We started to talk about climate and having the first declaration. We always forget about it because after there was Kyoto, there are others. The latest, most important reference setting targets is Paris Agreement, COP21. And it was 2015, the same golden year of the Agenda 2030. So a setting of starting a new wave. What was the decision and the geographical coverage of the agreement? So in the map here, you will find the country participating as a ratified or just signed. But the idea is actually that all the country are committed to have global average temperature below, well below, not just below, well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and possibly limit to the increase at 1.5. Basically also try to reach the peak of emission as soon as possible, using science and technology, best available technologies to fight or any case, mitigate and of course try to adapt. And finally, a tool, and also in respect to developing countries, national climate action plans. So especially the more developed country, which are accounted by historically by to be the most important emitters worldwide of CO2 and greenhouse gases, committed to prepare national climate action plan. So this is just as a recap, but these are all these elements justify and helps to understand Europe. Another thing that are very helpful to understand the energy transition. I was saying before the meeting that Europe has a very strong commitment in climate diplomacy internationally, sustainable diplomacy, but also has some peculiarities in terms of primary resource import and consumption. I will now give a brief overview on some data that are enlightening us on basically a characteristic on energy security and dependency of Europe in general. And I invite you, if you like, in this day, just to Google Yahoo or something like YouTube, and von der Leyen, which is the president of the Commission, talking about the high increase in prices in Europe in these days. You will grasp also the geopolitical elements behind the energy transition. So let's have this first very interesting graph. So production of primary energy 2019. So it's a credible 36.5 in primary energy is related to renewable, 32 nuclear energy, solid fossil fuel 60.2, plus 8.5 in natural gas, and plus 3.2 in crude oil, and other 3.6. So, well, renewable are strongly related to bioenergy and waste. Second, followed by wind and hydro and tidal wave and ocean. Solar and ambient heat is quite important, and geothermal is also included. And let's consider that when we say European Union, we don't have Iceland. This is also how the situation is evolving. So in terms of the last 10 years, we can see that natural gas and crude oil and solid fossil fuel are decreasing in production, and renewable energy are increasing. Well, so the nuclear energy is stable. Why crude oil and natural gas and solid fossil fuel are decreasing? I was saying before, studying resources and reserves, we can say that basically an investment in exploration, we can say that in general, in the latest 20 years after the peaks in the 80s and the 90s, there are not been really too much investment and exploration. So basically is exhaustion, is the end of life or towards the end of life of several investments in the North Sea especially, but also in the Mediterranean and some in inland. But Europe produce only 50% of the energy that is consumed. So we compensate with import. And as we can see, that dependency rate is stable and in oil and gas and slightly increasing. Natural gas is significantly higher up in the latest year. So it's not so pink as we would and blue as we would have thought. The situation is that Europe is really trying to push towards renewables to definitely also reduce an dependency rate and having a major diversified mix in terms of energy. The situation, country by country, and how has been changed in the past 10 years. So it's very variegated because there is a general policy at European level, but still the country have a very big autonomous um, power. And they can decide, they might have to decide in different way according also to their situations. So of course, solar energy can be more interesting for the Mediterranean area, whilst other type of energies are characteristic in other area. Geothermal, for example, is very promising for in Italy in potentially, but a NIMBY effect, not in my backyard effect, is very strong, so that we don't have permitting possibilities. So this is also a very this multiscalar role of transition. So ideally everybody is there, but in practice, the permitting of renewable is really tough and conflicting. Probably is the same in the US, but I can confirm that Europe is not better positioned. In any case, Norway, that is not part of European Union, also probably because of this, is one of the few country of Europe in terms of geographical Europe that has not still not problem on import, but is an exporter. So Denmark was an exporter, but then reducing some of the activities because they phased out also oil and gas, or they're phasing out, so they're turning as well and importing. So this is the situation. Some countries are really fully dependent, but they are small, generally Malta, Cyprus, Luxembourg, and so on. This is really on all what we call Europe, including neighboring countries, but not European Union parts. So what I was saying before, dependency. Who's energizing Europe then? Mostly all these countries around Europe. So it's really fascinating. It's like Europe at the center and all the energy exporters to Europe all around. So Algeria, Libya, Egypt. Egypt is extraordinarily interesting lately regarding natural gas. A major discovery in the Zohr field, of, slightly offshore Alexandria, really changed completely the energy situation in Egypt. From a net importer, now it became a net exporter of natural gas, for example. All Middle East, as you can see, the Caspian area, and Russia and Norway. So very, very insightful. And this, of course, tells you quite a lot about the geopolitics. And we will see in the partnership policy later on what kind of policy we do have at European level with the neighboring country. Here provides the change in energy consumption. So basically the efficiency and the behavioral policies, how they are doing. Generally okay. Also because of some economic crisis, let's say. You see that, for example, Poland, that doesn't had a big, did not have a big economic crisis, had a quite big improve in consumption. So this is the situation. A little bit on targets in EU. In this case, we do have models of the European Environmental Agency in terms of consumption. Currently, we are going down in terms of primary energy and final energy consumption. Final energy consumption is not going down as the primary energy consumption. So meaning that Europeans tend to still improve, despite efficiency, still increase on the consumption of energy. Target, of course, are trying to reach lower and lower because the second indicator, generally strongly correlated, is the greenhouse emission targets. And this is where the effort has to be reached significantly, with the idea to have a 2050 and net zero emission, okay? The target seems to be feasible in models. Let's see, but it's really strong. So we will see how, and we will discuss about how this will affect. Another very important, that's the last table that I will show you in this overview in data and graphs, is the finally energy consumption by sector, because the policies we will see are strongly organized by tackling the three main energy consumption targets. So industry, households, and transport, okay? Then we do have services, agriculture, and forestry, and so on. This is in generally slightly different compared to the greenhouse gases emission, especially because we all know that greenhouse gas emission are also quite linked to agriculture and forestry. But because we are talking about energy transition, we'll stick with this as a graph, as a reference. So European Union energy policies, now after all this, we will very quickly understand why I choose this type of graph and maps to show you about the geography and the policy that we do have in Europe in the latest years and decades. Actually, energy policy and energy material has been characterizing European partnership since the beginning, because in 1952, the European coal and steel community started to try to find common agreements to deal with the coal supply, security, and all these kind of things. And with the same principle of partnership, in the second map here, we can see how we still have UK in this map, how the partnership has been really developing. So within a middle type of economic partnership, which is European Economic Area, where Norway is included, and Iceland as well, and Switzerland. We do have partnership cooperation with Russia and all the Eastern countries, and partnership agreement with all the southern part of the Mediterranean area, but Libya and Syria because of conflicts. Another thing, as I said before, these slides try to recap in the latest 20, 30 years the type of regulation and legislation that have been developed, and generally are developed with these three type of major fields. So energy of efficient building, starting with in the 90s, always also in the 90s, starting about renewable energy regulations, and then we more recent the industrial sector, and latest on transport sector. So transport has been a little bit overlooked, and I think COP25 in Glasgow will work on transport targets and in the change, in the change of technology on vehicles. Another way on the latest years, the pace on the packages and attention to energy and climate has been really rising up very, very strongly, even too much sometimes, to tell you in practice. You finish or something, you change the target, you don't even perceive it. Say, oh, we were to 40, or no, we get to 55. Okay, so, well, how can you do it? Really a new wave of greening European policy in general, including, of course, as a strong point, energy has been set by the new commission, the von der Leyen Commission in 2019, with a new strategic document called EU Green Deal. And this year, so really in these days, we do have the finalization of a new package, for 55th package, setting minus 55% on green gas emissions versus 1919 level, by 2030, so quite steep as a reduction. Setting 30% share for renewable energy and 36% improvement in energy efficiency. And therefore, this is very challenging, I tell you. This is a little bit more how to reach that. Tools, revision of the effort sharing regulation, revision of emission trading, social climate funds, revision of the energy taxation directive, renewable energy directive also, with a revision on energy efficiency, so hiring up all the targets and all the performance of this tool. Then we do have expecting a third package for gas, a cross-border adjustment mechanism to deal better with externalities from extra European countries, and revision of CO2 standard, reducing methane emission in energy. But here you don't see other things like the taxonomy in financial sustainable finance that are actually strongly affecting investment on oil and gas. So you know that Norway, we're not talking about European Commission, but Norway, with the sovereign funds in Norway, now they're not investing anymore in oil and gas investments. So this makes a big change. A little bit of recap on who are the actors in the EU energy transition, how the governance of the organization are helping us on reaching this very ambitious target. Of course, international level, that's the same probably as the US. We do have United Nations and organizations, the G7 and G20, the Development Finance Institution, and international agency like International Energy Agency, and the RENA, which is the renewable energy in the International Renewable Energy Agency. So at the European level, the governance European level is a bit complicated, so I will not go in details, but we do have a trilateral main decision system done through the Council of Ministers, European Commission and European Parliament, plus European Council. Then there are the operational part, so the Commission agencies, the European External Action Services, so the geopolitical party, the international relationship and diplomacy. We do have financial institutions that are connected by the European Union, so European Investment Bank directly, the BRD kind of, and other organizations that are can be included in this. Every member state have ministries, President Council according to their structures, the Parliament, regulatory authority. This is typically about Italy, and territorial institution. That's also depending on the country, but regions, municipality can make the change. I can think about Germany, for example, France, and so on, where regions can have an autonomous role on this. So the governance is quite complicated, but the goals are quite sharp and clear. So everybody is called to help. This doesn't include, but that's very important, the private system. Europe, especially in energy production, tends to have an hybrid system, public-private. One of the main differences between the US and Europe, for example, is that the ownership of the underground resources is public, so it's a common good. Whilst in the US, you still have a very traditional Roman type of sense of property that is the cone toward the center of the earth. So This makes quite a big difference in terms of possibility to act as a policy on primary resources. So last part, I hope that you are not too bored so far. As I said, we went through all this journey and saying how difficult and how things are, but now we go a little bit on food for thought for us as a geographer. I could have even more questions or statements that are actually to be reflected. But I will just go on these and with some couple of examples. So first of all, well, we talk about Europe, but we said Europe is a set of 28 up to 1.5 years ago. Now it's 27 country plus partnerships, so it's a complex geographical area, and every country and every region might have, every major city have its own role in this process. And another thing is that energy transition fades out. Fades out means decommissioning, so it's still an activity, but there are places that can be winner or loser. And in this case, it's what is an interesting European instrument, which is still not strongly financed compared to others, but it's conceptually very intriguing for us as a geographer, is the Just Transition Fund and the mechanism. So basically, the internal discussion among countries was, well, you know, I do have to phase out coal power plants and coal mining, but this is my major resource for energizing my country. Why should I do so? And especially in the area of Germany that was done phasing out coal, but in that area there was not much other possibility. So there was a social discontent. Poland strongly negotiated this Just Transition Fund. So basically, is the time now comes into again into the policy and politics. Okay, so we all know that the ambition in Europe and worldwide to go for transition have to be just in terms of social justice towards an area where labor is centered into the old and traditional way of energizing societies. So this program provides funds to alleviate the impact of the transition, financing diversification and modernization of local economy, and mitigating negative repercussion in employment, so job allocation shocks and so on. So by training, by other things. This map is not, I don't think it's, at least for Italy, doesn't respect a real area where the Europe will be affected by the transition. This is only coal area, or because of the money were so small at the beginning, at least Italy said, well, we do concentrate in only 2 areas. But if I added up also the 5 coal power plants, we have 5 more places. On top of it, the phase out of oil and gas extraction, we will find another 5 places as well. So the just transition is something to be taken in consideration, to be fair. Skill and labor might be not enough for UN energy transition, European Union energy transition. This does not mean just winner and loser in terms of space, because we do have location that will have extra job because of job loss, extra employee without job because of job loss. But energy transition requires knowledge that are not spread around. Requires people, young people, and we all know that most of the European countries have a demographic downturn. So we don't have too many young people. This is not only for energy, that's a big question in all economic perspective in Europe. Do we have enough people? do we know have enough people trained in these items? Because you didn't need, in energy transition, you didn't need to have a different mindset. You have long-termism inside of your mind, complexity, multi-energy. So an energy manager has to know from geothermal to oil and gas, but also biological mechanism and biological processes that all are a different field of knowledge. So very complex knowledge. We already talked about how behavior will be conflicting, either in the location choices, but also on behavior. And shall we reduce travel? And this in post-pandemic, this post-pandemic rebound is actually giving us some headache. Rome in these days that we have reopening and enthusiasm, it's plus 25% before COVID in traffic jams, number of cars in the city. So public transport is the conflicting with post-COVID, still not full post-COVID. So we all have this shortage in raw material and energy in this period because of an increase in optimism in production as well. I was talking about raw material, definitely, especially this shift from gas, natural gas or oil based gasoline, whatever, cars to electrification, which seems to be a credible wave. These are data regarding Iceland, Norway, and UK, so outside of EU, but it's really ramping up. And then we do have a shift in raw materials. So we can imagine that this is a big challenge. So European Union is also working on security on critical raw material, I guess also the US. Then let's do the last two things. One is hopefully a good news. This last is how it's more on diplomacy and data. The first is that can we expect technological breakthrough? This is a big discussion lately about the role of the most advanced nuclear system, especially done with not with fission, but with fusion. So if so, can this change completely the energy patterns, and when? 2050, 2070, 2035? That's a big question. And how the cost will be, and who's going to be the winner in terms of technology. And the last, Europe is sufficiently sufficient in this challenge, or we do have to play as a big work and a big world all together in a common partnership. So this is all the things that I wanted to tell to you. This was about the global investment, also how the trends are, and telling us that significantly are improving the renewable, but fossil fuel power is stable. But still, I think we really wait for novelty to reach the target for the whole world in terms of energy transition. So transition will be helping us for a few years still. Thank you very much. And I leave the floor to question.